They say loyalty always pays off, but that's not true. Not in the world I lived in. I used to believe if you worked hard, stayed honest, and gave everything to your job, life would return the favor. And for a long time, I thought that's what was happening. For 4 years, Henderson Dynamics was my second home. Late nights, early mornings, it didn't matter. I believed in the company, and I believed in him, my boss, Mr. Clark. He was everything I thought a mentor should be. Confident, respected, admired by everyone. When he spoke, the whole floor went silent. And when he praised me, I felt unstoppable. I wasn't the loudest or the smartest, but I was the one who stayed after everyone left. Fixing problems, building systems, keeping things together. I didn't do it for praise. I did it because it felt right. Then came Project Skyline. It was the biggest assignment the company had ever handled. A project that could double our revenue and secure the company's future. Mr. Clark handpicked me to lead it. I remember his words like it was yesterday. "Daniel, I trust you with this. Don't let me down." And I didn't. I poured everything into it. Weeks without proper sleep, missed birthdays, missed life. But when we finally launched, it worked. We hit numbers no one thought were possible. For the first time in my career, I felt proud. Not just tired, proud. The CEO came down to congratulate the team. People were smiling, clapping. Clark shook my hand in front of everyone and said, "You've outdone yourself, Daniel. Don't worry, your bonus will reflect that." My chest filled with something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Maybe finally, hard work did pay off. But life has a strange way of testing your faith right when you start believing again. A week before the bonuses were to be announced, I got an email. Meeting with Mr. Clark, 3 p.m. Nothing unusual, still something in my gut felt off. When I walked into his office, the blinds were half closed. The air felt heavy. Clark didn't smile this time. He didn't even offer me a seat right away. He spoke slowly, like someone rehearsing bad news. "Daniel, the company's been restructuring. Some tough decisions had to be made." I didn't understand at first. I thought maybe someone from my team was getting reassigned. But then he looked me in the eye, and I'll never forget that cold tone. "I'm afraid we have to let you go." Let me go? I thought I misheard him. "Sir, what? We just finished Skyline. The results—" He cut me off, avoiding my eyes. "You did great work, Daniel, but we have to think long term. You'll get your final paycheck next week." Final paycheck. Those words echoed in my head like a hammer strike. I asked about the bonus, the one he promised. He smiled, not kindly, but like someone who'd already moved on. "Bonuses are for current employees, Daniel. I wish things were different." That's when I knew. This wasn't about restructuring. It was planned, precise, timed perfectly to save the company, or rather him, money. I stood there in silence, trying to process what had just happened. 4 years. 4 years of effort, loyalty, and sacrifice erased in one meeting. As I walked out of his office, people looked up from their desks and then quickly looked away. No one said a word. That's how corporate life works. One day you're the hero, the next you're invisible.
I cleaned out my desk in silence. My hands were shaking, not from anger, but from disbelief. Every photo, every little note from teammates, suddenly felt like a joke. The elevator ride down felt endless, and when the doors opened, the cool air hit my face, but it didn't feel freeing. It felt empty. That night, I sat alone in my apartment with the termination letter in my hands. I read it again and again, trying to find something, a reason, a clue, anything that made sense. But it was just corporate language, cold, rehearsed words. And then it hit me. He knew exactly when to do it. Right after the project ended, right before the bonus. So he could take the credit and I'd be too shocked to fight back. That realization hurt more than losing the job itself. Because betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from the people you trust. I remember sitting there, the city lights flickering outside my window, and whispering to myself, he planned this, and I'll never forget it. Something inside me changed that night. The man who once believed in loyalty stopped believing in promises. The man who once stayed late for his boss started replaying every lie, every fake smile, every "I'm proud of you" that Clark ever said. I didn't know it yet, but that moment, that quiet, painful night, was the beginning of something much bigger. Because when you've lost everything, your trust, your pride, your peace, the only thing left is the will to fight back. And I was ready to learn that lesson. The night after I lost my job, silence felt louder than any crowd. I lay there, eyes open, counting the cracks in my ceiling because sleep wouldn't come. When it finally did, it wasn't rest. It was a fall. And every morning I woke up in the same place, halfway between disbelief and a slow, heavy anger. Days blurred. Coffee went cold on my desk. I told my parents I was taking time off, and even hearing those words made my chest tighten. Time off sounds like a gift. This wasn't a gift. This was a door slammed in my face. I tried to keep a routine. Wake up, shower, fix my resume, search for roles. But every bullet point I wrote reminded me of the one truth I didn't want to admit. I built something real at Henderson Dynamics, and I walked out with nothing to show for it, not even the dignity of the truth attached to my name. At night, I scrolled through the feed we all pretend we don't care about. Updates, promotions, smiling posts. And there he was, Mr. Clark. Sharp suit, bright lights, a caption carefully written, but cold enough to cut. Proud of my leadership team for the innovation behind Project Skyline, a milestone for Henderson, excited for what's next. My leadership team, his innovation. He didn't mention me. Not once. Not in the post, not in the comments, not even in a small thank you that could have cost him nothing. People lined up to praise him. The same people who shook my hand the week before were now calling him a visionary. Each like, each heart, each congratulation felt like a quiet stamp over my name. Erased. That was the first night I didn't just feel sad. I felt something colder. Not rage that explodes. Rage that waits. Rage that makes room for clarity. I told myself to let it go, move on. But moving on is hard when your story has been rewritten without you. 3 nights later, while the city hummed and the clock blinked, 2:11 a.m., my phone buzzed. A name I hadn't seen in a while. Liam. He started at the company as a junior analyst 2 years back. I trained him on his first big data set. He used to ask a lot of questions, the kind that showed he cared. Daniel, you up? Sorry for the time. You need to see this. There was a file attached. Screenshots, email chains, internal messages. My hands went cold before I even opened the first one. Clark to senior leadership. I took the lead on Skyline's framework to stabilize our timelines. We had execution risks due to resistance from Daniel. I redirected the project to ensure alignment with our vision.
Execution risks. That's how he explained the guy who stayed late for months to keep the team standing. Resistance. That's how he painted my questions, the ones I asked to prevent careless mistakes. More screenshots. Meeting notes where he presented my architecture. Slides with my diagrams, my headers, my wording, copy-pasted and placed under his name. He didn't just push me out. He rebuilt the story so that I looked like the storm and he looked like the shelter. I stared at the screen until the texts blurred. For a second, I didn't feel anger or sadness. I felt hollow, like my voice had been pulled from the room. Then Liam wrote again. I know this isn't right. I saved what I could before access changed. I'm sorry, Daniel. I should have said something earlier. I breathed out slowly. I typed back, You did say something. You did. The room felt different now. Smaller. Sharper. The air had weight. The kind that settles just before a storm. I opened my laptop. I still had temporary access to a part of the company's shared drive, one of those leftover structures IT sometimes forgets. I went quiet and careful. No quick moves, no careless clicks. Search. Skyline V1. Folders unfolded like a map I used to know by heart. There it was, the first draft of the architecture proposal, created by me 4 months before Clark ever mentioned the framework in a meeting. Timestamps. Version history. Comments with my initials. The build logs, the commit notes, the rollout plan with my voice in every line. I clicked into the comments and found the parts that still carried my fingerprints. We can't push this update without load testing. It'll crash under traffic. We should split the pipeline so we don't break the legacy system. Run a shadow deployment for 48 hours first. If it holds, we flip the switch. I remembered the night those choices kept us from a disaster. We avoided a shutdown that would have embarrassed the entire division. Clark called me at midnight that night to say, "Good call, Daniel." He sounded proud. Now I knew what the praise was worth. Warm air that disappears in seconds. I started gathering everything. Emails with drafts attached, meeting invites I sent, files with my name in the metadata. I exported copies and saved them to an external drive. I wasn't loud. I didn't announce a thing. I just moved with the kind of calm that comes after a long, deep breath. With every file I saved, my heartbeat steadied. With every record I found, the fog lifted.
He didn't just fire me. He tried to break the bridge back to my own work. But the bridge was still there. He forgot I built it, piece by piece. He forgot I keep receipts. I scrolled to the very first email where the project was named Skyline by me because Clark wanted to call it Edge and it didn't fit. I wrote, "Let's call it Skyline. If we do this right, it changes the view for the whole company." I leaned back and laughed. Not a happy laugh, One of those short, disbelieving laughs that says, "I see it now." He didn't just lie about the work. He tried to repaint the sky. Liam sent one more message. "They're saying you were difficult, that you blocked progress, that you didn't work well with leadership." There it was, the missing piece of the plan. He couldn't just push me out, he had to make me look like a problem. That way, if I ever spoke up, my words would arrive pre-stamped with doubt. I thanked Liam. He wrote, "If you need me to talk, I will." I told him to stay quiet for now. We'd do this right. No noise, no reckless moves. I opened a blank document and wrote 3 lines. What I built, when I built it, who saw it. A simple list, but simple things are strong when the truth sits behind them. I don't know how many hours passed. The sky outside shifted from ink to gray. Somewhere between folder exports and cross-checks, the ache in my chest changed shape. It wasn't pain anymore. It wasn't even rage. It was something cleaner. Resolve. I stood, stretched my back, then looked at the termination letter on my table. It didn't scare me anymore. Paper can't erase the history that's carved into logs, emails, timestamps, and a dozen late nights that nearly broke me. I closed the laptop and let the silence sit with me, not heavy this time, but steady, like a hand on my shoulder. He thought he could end the story by cutting me out before the credits rolled. But stories don't end because someone says so. Stories end when the truth is done speaking. As the first light hit the window, I whispered it aloud, not for drama, not for comfort, just to hear the words outside my head. He took my job, but not my evidence. And in that single breath, the first spark of revenge found air. Not the kind that burns everything down, but the kind that lights a path. A careful path. A patient one. I wasn't coming back to the office. I was moving forward to something sharper. Something he never expected. Justice doesn't always wear armor. Sometimes it wears a timestamp. Sometimes it sounds like a quiet voice saying, "I can prove it." After days of silence and anger, I finally did something different. I didn't scroll through old emails or stare at Clark's face on company posts. I opened a new folder on my desktop and named it Justice. It felt strange, almost unreal. A week ago, I was just another fired employee. Now, I was building something bigger. A plan. Not for revenge, born of rage, but for justice built on truth. That's when I met Sarah, an old friend from college, now a corporate lawyer with eyes that could see through walls. We hadn't spoken in years, but when I told her I needed advice, she cleared her schedule. She sat across from me, listening quietly as I told her everything. Every lie, every broken promise, every piece of proof I had. I showed her the files Liam sent, the time-stamped code logs, the emails where Clark rewrote history to make himself the hero. Sarah didn't interrupt. She just kept reading, her expression tightening. Finally, she looked up. "Daniel, this isn't just wrongful termination," she said slowly. "This is fraud. Corporate fraud." Her words hit me like a spark in dry air. Fraud. It wasn't just my pride at stake anymore. It was integrity, truth, justice. She leaned forward, her tone calm but sharp. "If you want to do this, we'll need everything. Every draft, every message, every timestamp that proves you built Skyline." I nodded. I already started. That week became a blur of quiet, focused work. While the world slept, I built my case. Every night, I'd sit at my kitchen table, surrounded by folders and sticky notes.
emails, meeting invites, system logs. I printed each one and marked them with dates, connecting them like puzzle pieces. I wasn't fueled by anger anymore. This was something colder, sharper, like a knife being honed. For the first time since that office meeting, I felt in control. I backed up every file twice, reached out to a few old colleagues, carefully, quietly. Some didn't reply. Others sent small messages of support. He did the same thing to me. Clark took credit for our team's idea last year, too. Piece by piece, a pattern started forming. This wasn't just me. He'd been doing this for years, climbing the ladder using other people's work as his steps. One night, Sarah called. "We're ready. You have enough evidence to file. I'll draft the claim." Her voice was calm, confident, the kind of strength I'd forgotten existed in my world. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the city outside my window. The skyline shimmered in the distance. Ironic, I thought. Project Skyline. The same name he stole from me now stood before me, glowing in the night. But while I was preparing, Clark was celebrating. LinkedIn posts, interviews. He'd just been promoted again. Director of Innovation. The same innovation he stole from others. Every headline carried his name, and instead of anger, I felt something else. Patience. Because I knew what was coming. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it moves in silence, like a shadow that waits for dawn. The night before filing, I sat in the dark with all my evidence spread across the table. I traced the path of every lie, every moment he turned my loyalty into leverage. In one corner of the room, the termination letter still sat. Folded, creased, worn from the number of times I'd read it. I looked at it and whispered to myself, "You fired me in silence. Now I'll answer in daylight." The next morning, I walked into Sarah's office. She was waiting with a calm smile, a stack of papers in front of her. "Are you ready?" I nodded.
More than ever. She handed me the pen. I signed my name at the bottom, slowly, deliberately. Each letter felt heavier than ink. It wasn't just a signature. It was closure in motion. The lawsuit was official. Daniel Miller versus Henderson Dynamics. As I walked out of her office, sunlight spilled through the glass doors, and for the first time in months, it didn't feel harsh. It felt earned. Somewhere, Clark was probably laughing in his new office, probably thinking I'd moved on, that I'd accepted defeat. But he was wrong. The storm he started was finally turning back toward him. You see, life has a strange balance. Sometimes it doesn't give justice right away. It watches what you'll do with the pain, whether you'll let it destroy you or reshape you. I chose to reshape. He taught me betrayal, but I was about to teach him consequence. And the best part, I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to fight dirty. I just needed the truth and patience. Because the truth, when given time, becomes the loudest voice in the room. The day my lawsuit hit Henderson Dynamics, the silence broke. Not my silence, theirs. For months, they ignored me, pretended I didn't exist. But that morning, they couldn't, because for the first time, my name was right next to theirs, not as an employee,
but as a plaintiff. Daniel Miller versus Henderson Dynamics. Those words looked unreal on paper, but they felt like truth carved into stone. Inside the company, chaos spread like wildfire. Emails flew between executives. Legal teams scrambled. Everyone wanted to know how a former mid-level employee had dared to sue one of the fastest-growing firms in the industry. I could almost imagine Clark's face when he first heard the news. That perfect calm of his, cracking. The first call came the same afternoon. Unknown number. I knew before answering who it was. "Daniel?" a voice said, smooth but tight. "It's me, Clark." For a second, I said nothing. I wanted him to feel that silence. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I never meant for things to go this way. Maybe we should talk, off the record." His tone was syrupy, practiced, the same fake warmth he used when he took credit for my work. I replied quietly, "You're right. There was a misunderstanding. You thought I'd stay quiet." There was a pause on the line. Then he sighed. "Let's be reasonable, Daniel. This will only hurt you. The company has resources, lawyers, reputation. And I have the truth. Let's see which one lasts longer." I hung up before he could finish. Over the next week, Henderson's legal department reached out to Sarah, my lawyer. They offered settlements, quiet money, no headlines, no admission of guilt. Sarah refused every single one. "We don't settle lies. We expose them." Her words weren't loud, but they carried more weight than 1,000 threats. And she meant every one.
Then came the first court hearing. It wasn't cinematic. No shouting, no flashing cameras, just quiet tension, polished tables, and the hum of fluorescent lights. But beneath that calm, the balance of power began to shift. Clark sat across from me, flanked by expensive lawyers and a face full of fake composure. He glanced at me once, a short look, part arrogance, part disbelief. He still thought I'd break, but I didn't. Sarah began with what she called the foundation. She presented timestamps, digital footprints from the project logs, emails with my name as author, system records that showed I built the core framework weeks before Clark even accessed it. Piece by piece, the truth unfolded, quiet, steady, undeniable. Clark's lawyers tried to twist it. They called it team collaboration. They said leadership guided the project vision. But Sarah stayed calm. She leaned forward and said, "Guidance doesn't include rewriting history. Mr. Clark didn't guide, he took." For the first time, I saw Clark's jaw tighten. It was small, barely a twitch, but I noticed. As I watched the evidence stack higher, I realized something. Power doesn't belong to those who shout the loudest. It belongs to those who can prove the truth without raising their voice. Every file we showed, every witness we brought, it chipped away at the empire Clark had built, the same empire made of stolen credit and manipulated loyalty. And with every passing hour, I felt lighter. Not victorious, not yet, but free. Because finally, someone was listening. When the case went public, the company's PR machine kicked in fast. Press releases, statements about miscommunication. They called me disgruntled. They painted Clark as a visionary under stress. For a few days, their version dominated the headlines. But then the cracks started to show. A few ex-employees spoke anonymously. A whistleblower shared documents confirming internal manipulation of project credits. Slowly, the media tone shifted from defense to doubt. I watched from home as one headline flashed on the screen: "Director under scrutiny after fraud allegations." Clark's face appeared beside the headline, confident as ever, but his eyes said something else now. They said fear. I wasn't after revenge anymore. Not really. I just wanted him to face the truth he'd buried under lies. And now he couldn't bury it anymore. Sarah turned to me after the hearing. "She's starting to sweat," she said quietly. "He's realizing you won't back down."
I nodded, feeling a strange mix of calm and power. For months, I'd been the one blindsided, humiliated, silenced. Now, the silence belonged to him. That night, I wrote in my journal, "Every truth I speak makes his empire crumble." And it was true. Not because I shouted, not because I fought dirty, but because I refused to be erased. Sometimes, justice doesn't look like a victory parade. It looks like quiet endurance, like holding your ground when they expect you to fall. Clark had his titles, his arrogance, his corporate shield, but I had something stronger: proof, patience, and peace. And as the case moved forward, one thing became clear. He wasn't fighting for victory anymore. He was fighting not to lose everything. The final hearing didn't feel like a battle. It felt like a held breath. I sat at the plaintiff's table, palms flat, trying to steady the rhythm of my heartbeat. Across the room, Clark stared straight ahead, pretending he wasn't watching me. He always did that. Acted like nothing could touch him. But even from here, I could see it. The stiffness in his jaw, the way his fingers tapped the table, then stopped when he noticed. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Silence fell like a curtain. This was it. Not just for me, but for every night I spent alone, every file I backed up, every lie I refused to swallow. It wasn't about anger anymore. It was about truth finding its voice. Sarah leaned toward me and whispered, "Breathe, we're ready." I nodded. I believed her. The defense started with the same script they'd been reading for weeks. Team effort, shared credit, strategic leadership. Their words were smooth, polished, trained to sound harmless. Then Sarah stood. Her voice was calm, not loud. She didn't try to perform. She just laid out the story step by step, like building a bridge that anyone could cross. "Your Honor, we'll begin with the foundation, timeline and authorship." She presented the timestamps first, documents created by me months before Clark ever touched the framework, system logs with my name, version history with my comments. Every slide, every email, every line of planning sat under the courthouse lights. Plain, clear, quietly undeniable. The judge nodded. The defense asked sharp questions, tried to cloud the air with long sentences and careful phrasing, but the paper did not shake. The timeline did not move. Then came the witnesses. Liam was first, hands slightly shaking, voice steadying with each answer. Daniel led the architecture from day one. He built the core. We all knew it. He described meetings where Clark arrived late and took notes like a collector, not a creator. He described a week I urged a staged rollout that saved us from a shutdown. His eyes kept flicking to me as if to say, "I should have spoken sooner." I nodded back. "You're speaking now." 2 more colleagues followed. One had left the company months ago. I remember seeing Daniel's drafts on the shared drive long before leadership got involved, she said. Another described a hallway moment,
how Clark asked for my slides to review, then presented them the next day with minor edits and a new title page. "We were shocked," he said softly, "but we were scared to say anything." I felt something deep in my chest shift. It wasn't joy. It was relief, the kind that makes your shoulders drop without you noticing. The defense tried to frame it as confusion. Memory, they said, is not proof. Sarah smiled. Good thing we have both. Then she brought out the key piece, an email I never had seen until Liam found it.
A draft from Clark to senior leadership, days before my termination. Subject line, Project Skyline, credit alignment. The phrase alone chilled the room. She handed a copy to the judge, to the defense, to Clark. The paper in his hands looked heavier than it should. Sarah's voice stayed even. This is Mr. Clark discussing how to rewrite credits on Project Skyline to emphasize leadership input and minimize the role of the execution lead. She let that sit. The execution lead is Daniel Miller. The judge read silently, eyes moving slowly, thoughtfully. The defense objected. Sarah answered with chain of custody details, metadata, server logs. The judge accepted. I looked at Clark. For the first time, he didn't look like stone. He looked tired, like the mask he wore every day had finally started to crack at the edges. Sarah's voice stayed even. This is Mr. Clark discussing how to rewrite credits on Project Skyline to emphasize leadership input and minimize the role of the execution lead. She let that sit. The execution lead is Daniel Miller. A murmur in the gallery. Quiet again. The corporate executives from Henderson Dynamics shift in their seats. I saw the shock ripple across the row of executives from Henderson Dynamics. Faces that once looked so sure now carried a question they couldn't hide. How much did we miss? How much did we allow? The judge looked up. Mr. Clark, do you have a response? Clark cleared his throat. There was pressure. We were moving fast. We needed to align messaging. It wasn't meant to erase anyone's contribution. Sarah didn't raise her voice. Erasing names is not alignment. The judge watched him for a long moment. And in that stillness, the last of his arrogance drained away. Panic doesn't always shout. Sometimes it's just a quiet swallow, a stare fixed on the table, a hand that won't stop adjusting a watch strap. Corporate PR had tried to shape a different story outside these walls: miscommunication, stress, a proud, visionary leader. But paper doesn't care about spin. Logs don't care about titles. Truth does not bow. The judge began to speak. Time slowed. I heard my own breath, felt the cool of the courtroom, saw Sarah's stillness like an anchor. The record is clear, the judge said. Documentation shows authorship by Mr. Miller, with attempts by Mr. Clark to alter credit and diminish his role. The termination's timing, combined with the internal messaging, points to coordinated misconduct. Coordinated misconduct. The words felt heavy and clean. This court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Daniel Miller. I closed my eyes, not to hide tears. There weren't any. I was empty of that now. I closed them to mark the moment, to put a pin in time and tell myself You did not let him erase you. The judge continued. Compensation, damages, legal fees, but the part that mattered most wasn't the numbers. It was the acknowledgement. The words entered into record. My authorship, my work, my name. When I opened my eyes, I saw the executives again. Some looked away. One nodded to me. A small, quiet gesture. Respect. Late, but real. Clark sat very still. His position, gone. His image, exposed. His voice, for once, silent.
Reporters waited in the hall, but I didn't stop to talk. Sarah answered what needed answers. I stepped into the light outside and let the air hit my face. It felt like a door opening after a long winter. I didn't feel the urge to gloat. I didn't want revenge speeches or victory dances. I wanted peace. And for the first time in a long time, I felt close to it. On the steps, I looked back at the building. Those high windows, that clean stone. A place that once held my silence had just spoken my truth out loud. I thought about the team, about Liam, about the people who whispered, "Me too," in quiet messages. This win wasn't a roar, it was a signal. You are not crazy. You are not invisible. Keep your receipts. I breathed in, let it out slowly. He taught me betrayal, I taught him consequence. Here's what I learned. Power built on borrowed credit can look tall, but it shakes when the truth touches it. And justice? It doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it walks in softly, places a hand on your shoulder and says, "Stand up. You're seen." I'm not the man who walked into that office months ago. I'm steadier now, quieter. Not because I gave up, but because I finally got back what he tried to take. My name, my work, my voice. What does victory feel like when the crowd goes quiet? For me, it felt like breathing without armor. No defense, no fear, just air. Time moved on, the way it always does. Weeks turned into months, and I learned to live without checking headlines every morning. I learned to drink my coffee hot again. I learned to sleep. I joined a new firm. Smaller, hungrier, less polished. On my first day, the manager didn't ask me to prove I belonged. He said, "We read your case. We don't want a martyr. We want a builder." That word hit me hard. Builder. It reminded me of who I was before the noise. The guy who solved problems quietly and let the results speak. I wasn't the hero. I wasn't the victim. I was the person who showed up and did the work. And here, that was enough. My team was young, bright, and unafraid to ask questions. They didn't tiptoe around me. They called me Dan. They pushed back when they thought there was a better path. And when I said, "Let's test before we launch," they didn't roll their eyes. They said, "Let's do it right." The first project we shipped didn't make anyone famous. It just worked. No drama, no last-minute panic. At the end, the team clapped themselves on the back, and someone stuck a sticky note on my monitor. "Nice call, Dan."
I laughed. It was simple. It was honest. It was everything I had wanted for years. The news from Henderson Dynamics arrived like a breeze under a door. Quiet, almost shy. An article here, a whisper there. Clark resigned.
No press conference, no farewell tour, just a brief statement. Pursuing other opportunities. Inside sources said his reputation was complicated. The word made me smile, but not out of spite. It was a small acknowledgement that the truth had done its work. It didn't shout, it didn't gloat. It simply stood still until the lies fell away. I didn't celebrate. I didn't need to. Instead, I took a walk. I found myself outside the old glass building that used to feel like the center of my world. The same revolving doors, the same lobby plant, the same security guard. Older now, but with the same kind eyes. He saw me and raised his hand. I raised mine back. No bitterness, no heat in my chest, just peace. I stood across the street for a while watching people move in and out. Bags, laptops, coffee cups, late morning hurry. I remembered the feeling of belonging. I remembered the sting of losing it. And then I realized something gentle and quiet. I didn't need this place anymore. What I needed was never a building. It was the truth, and I had that. I walked down the block to the cafe where I met Sarah the first time. Same door chime, same wooden chairs that wobble if you lean too far. I ordered a coffee and sent her a message. "How's the quiet?" She replied with a single line. "Earned." I laughed. She was right. Some silence isn't emptiness. Some silence is the sound of weight lifted. Back at the new office, I started something small. On Fridays, I blocked an hour and called it Open Desk. Anyone could come by, ask anything. No judgment, no credit games. We talked through problems. We mapped ideas. We admitted when we didn't know. The room felt honest. The air felt light. One Friday, a new hire asked me, "How did you stay calm after everything?" I paused. I wanted to give him something real, not a movie line. I said, "Because I had proof, and because I learned that rushing isn't strength. Patience is." He nodded like he wanted to store that sentence for later. I hoped he would. Every so often, an email landed in my inbox from someone I used to work with. "Thank you. You made me brave. You reminded me to document everything." I answered each one, not with long speeches, just with the truth. You're not alone. Do the work. Keep your receipts. Move with patience. At night, the city looked different than it used to. The skyline, my old project's namesake, didn't feel like a wound anymore. It felt like a view, a reminder that we build both inside and outside. And when something in me wanted the old fire, the old rush of anger, I let it pass like traffic. I didn't need it to feel strong.
People asked if I forgave Clark. Forgiveness isn't a switch, it's a road. But I chose not to carry him with me. That was my forgiveness, to myself. I let the courts carry the judgment, and I let time carry the rest. I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted a life. One evening, on my way home, I stopped at a crosswalk and watched the light change. The wind was cool. The streetlights blinked on, one by one. And out of nowhere, a thought came and settled like a hand on my shoulder. Sometimes, revenge isn't fire. It's light. Not the light that blinds, the light that clarifies. The light that makes the path visible. The light that shows what stands and what falls. I thought about that night months ago, the one where I sat alone with the termination letter in my hands, feeling smaller than paper. If I could go back and stand beside that version of me, I'd say, "You're not weak, you're preparing." Because that's what silence was for me. Not surrender, preparation. Never mistake silence for weakness.
The quiet ones don't forget. They prepare. If you've ever been erased, if you've ever watched your work walk out of a room with someone else's name on it, hear me. Your value doesn't vanish because someone refuses to see it. The truth isn't a spotlight, it's a sunrise. It takes time, and then it's everywhere. I still write in my journal, short lines, nothing fancy. On the last page I wrote, "Build what lasts. Speak when it matters. Stand where the truth can find you." I closed the cover and turned off the lamp. The room went dark, but it didn't feel empty. It felt earned, like the pause after a good song, when you sit with the echo and smile. The next morning I walked into the office and found a sticky note waiting for me again. Different handwriting this time. "Thanks for the open desk. You made my week easier." I stuck it inside my journal and got to work. No anger, no audience, just the steady rhythm of a life rebuilt. Justice served, dignity restored, and the quiet still here, but now it sounds like peace. Sometimes revenge isn't fire, it's light. Daniel didn't just win, he reclaimed his dignity. If this story gave you chills, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe for more tales of betrayal, justice, and redemption. Because in the end, the quiet ones don't forget, they prepare.